All right, Web 19, UI Day 2. It's going to be fun. We're going to be talking about box model, CSS resets, display inline block, inline, and how they work with layout pieces. It's everything that we're doing is in the training kit. If you're not living in the training kit, you should be. You should be looking at this. You should be reading it. You should be watching the videos, attempting the challenges if you have time to do them. Remember, this is where we're going. It's all, at least in the full-time sense, because you guys are all full-time. When you're going down the full-time track, it's basically every day is a module. So you can know exactly what we're going to be covering tomorrow, what we covered on Monday. That's how it works. So just a quick review there. Also, in the calendar, remember, this is Mountain Time, but it's really Pacific. On your calendar, it's going to adjust. But after lunch, you've got, let me go to today. After lunch, you've got this video to watch. So Git, fork, and clone. So yes, you're going to be using Git for the first, or GitHub and Git for the first time today. You're going to clone the project onto your machine and start working on it. But as far as delivery goes, I think copying and pasting it up to a CodePen and passing it into your project manager is fine today, because we're not getting into the full Git flow today. Also, that's kind of a painful thing to copy and paste your code. I kind of want you, actually really would like you to go through that pain, because then you'll see how nice GitHub is tomorrow when we go through the full flow. So yesterday, you should have watched, these are required. This isn't like maybe, like you should have watched these two videos. If you're going, oh crap, I didn't watch those videos, don't freak out. It's only like 15 minutes of video. These are the number one thing you should be doing after lunch today. Then this one, okay? They're very short videos. I'm not exaggerating, like 10 minutes. But you've got to watch them, because they lead up to Thursday, where we're doing Git full-time on one day. We have found over a year of experience in this format that this is a really effective way for us to start learning Git, is one step at a time. Okay? All right, so that is the expectation for today. One thing I want to talk about is the questions thread. So the questions thread, what we're going to do is I'm going to make a questions thread today. We're going to try something new, because what happened yesterday is we had so many questions. We have so many people in here. I thought it was awesome. However, I want to make sure that we're following all of the questions that we can. So what I've done is we have two PMs that have already gone through this content, and they feel really confident in the content. I'm going to be having two PMs hawk the questions channel. So they're going to be watching your questions as they come in, and that's going to be their job for these next 2 hours, is to watch that thread and give responses. So the questions thread yesterday was like just questions, and I was like, hey guys, don't be making comments, blah, blah, blah. Well, I want the questions thread to be alive today. So we're going to have the PMs watch that, and you can have active conversation in that questions thread. I just want to keep it 2 questions, okay? So don't dilute it with a bunch of comments. But if you need to ask a question after your question, or make a comment, or yes, I got it, thank you, that's just fine. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to say questions thread for UI 2. So I'm going to create that thread right now. It's open. Okay. So here's the thing. I also want to try something else new that's never been done before at Lambda School. And this came from yesterday, trying to think out loud and try to solve problems. There's a really cool tool called Slido that allows us to basically aggregate questions, and then you can upvote them. And so what I want to do is I want to have this spot here be big conceptual questions or big problems that you're trying to solve. And we're going to just try having 2 places to ask questions today and see if it goes well. This is totally experimental, so if it sucks, we won't do it tomorrow. But if you guys like it, we'll keep trying. So what this looks like is I will be giving you a link, and then you'll be able to type your question here. So like, what is inline block? And then you can hit send, and it can be anonymous, or you can put your name in there. Doesn't matter, anonymous is fine. Now on my view, I will see the question. On your view, you'll be able to upvote this. So let me give you the link for this, and we're going to find out if this is effective or not. So here is the link for the Slido events. Now, don't worry about pinning this because it's just 2 chats under the question thread, which is pinned. So if you want to come back to it later, just hit the questions thread pin, scroll down a little, and there it is. So in this case, I want you to ask questions in here that either were kicking your butt yesterday or kicking your butt today. And the cool thing is this can be anonymous. So you don't have to be like nervous or feel weird about it. And then everybody should be watching this from time to time and then upvoting these things that go in there. Okay, we're going to try this out. It might suck. It might be amazing. That's we got to learn. Got to learn some things here. Okay, so that's happening right now. You can go in and put questions like, where are the videos for GitHub? And that's a great question. That is going to be inside of your calendar like we just talked about. Also, if you want to see the videos in order, go to Git for Web Development, and they're all here in the Thursday module. So 1, 2, 3, they're all there as well. So multiple ways to get those. But see, that's a great question. And so people can come in here and say, you know, upvote, upvote, upvote. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll come back to this at the end of a concept, and then I'm going to see what questions were upvoted and try to answer at least the top 5 questions. Because yesterday we had 177 responses in the question thread. It's a new record, so congratulations. But I felt like I wasn't able to teach you because we were answering so many questions. And so I think now with the project managers hawking the questions thread and with the Slido for the top 5, I think we're going to find a happy medium today. So that's the game plan. I want everybody to have the best experience possible. Okay, moving forward. So go ahead and ask questions here and then upvote the questions you want to see get to the top. And I'll come back to it after every concept. So I'm going to come back to user interface 2. Today we're going to identify and use all properties in the box model, use CSS display properties to build user interface, implement a CSS reset, and understand why it's important for cross-browser. So those are our 3 big items today that we're going to cover. And we're going to use our CodePen here to demonstrate the concepts that you've seen in the training kit. That's just how we're going to that's how everything should work here at Lambda School. Okay, so we are now ready to go through our box model and start figuring this stuff out. So box model is number 1, I think. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually set up down here. I'm going to open up a box. I've got it commented out the bottom of the page here. I want to look at just like the simpleness of just a box, and then we'll come back up to our layout up here. So you can see I've got lorem ipsum dolor right there at the bottom of this div, right? Okay. I want you to note that we've got the box class right there. I'm going to reference the box class by saying .box, right? Because that is a class selector. So let's talk about what the heck the box model even is. So the box model is how everything on the internet works, as far as layout goes, I should say. Like, let's go to any website. ESPN is great because it's got a bunch of boxes on it. So I always go here. But you can see we've got boxes everywhere. Just boxes everywhere. And so if I were to get my annotation tool out here, and they have a lot of ads bumping my page around. That's annoying. Okay, please stop bumping my page. All right, so watch this. We've got a box here. We've got a box here. We've got a box here. Here. Like everywhere we look, there is a box. It's crazy, right? And so what's happening is, if you don't notice it before, now you're probably going, holy crap, everything really is a box. Even circles that are made in CSS start as boxes. And so we can actually see these boxes clearer by using our inspector or development tools. So everybody, I want you can go to whatever website you want. It could be at Lambda School, whatever you want. I'm going to be on ESPN. But I want all of you to grab your mouse right now, and I want you to right-click on something you see, some element that you see. So follow along with me. Go ahead, right-click and inspect. hit this inspect. You should be in Chrome if this is exactly how it is. Firefox has similar things. If you're using Safari, stop for now, because I need you to use Chrome or Firefox. Specifically, we're going to be using Chrome for the next 4 weeks because of JavaScript tools that I want to use. So while we're learning, even if you hate Chrome, I get it, some people do. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be learning in this environment, and so I want your environment to match mine. So please, if you've not downloaded Chrome, do so just for the guided projects alone. So I'm going to inspect this element, and let's see what's going on. So first off, we can see some things that we looked at yesterday. We've got a P tag, we've got an H2, we've got a list item. We didn't really look at list item and unordered list, but hopefully you saw them in the pre-course if you've seen them before, but basically allows us to have lists of things. There's the header, which is semantic, and there's an article, which is semantic, right? So by the way, articles are meant to be standalone information that can be moved around. So in this case, this is an article, and they're calling it the submodule editorial, right? So they've got a design system here that looks like these are called submodule editorials on the right. Pretty cool. So you can actually kind of see how ESPN codes their code, like how they think about things. So look at all these classes they're using over and over for the same. Isn't that cool? Like, the stuff is real, like we're using it all the time. Just want to showcase to you that everything we're doing, the biggest companies do. So inside of our submodule editorial, I want you to notice that it's really just a box. So if I hover over it, look at that, just a box. Here's something really interesting. There should be a computed tab somewhere on your browser there in your DevTools, and it'll actually show you all these different layers of boxes here. This, my friends, is the box model visualized. So the developer tools are amazing for this because you can visualize all of the box model tools. For example, you can actually go to the bottom of this page and see it here as well. But I like computed because it's at the top. Computed tells you what the styles actually computed out to, whereas styles allows you to edit the styles live. That's right, I can actually change this box. So I could come in here and throw in some padding. You can see that I can actually change the website. Now what's really cool here is you can actually use your arrows to increment by 1 or 2. Look at this. They're even using the same class over here called submodule. See how I hover over that and you can see where it's being used? That's why classes are so powerful. They can be reused all over the place. So as I use my arrows, I can actually adjust the website incrementally. Pretty cool, right? Also, if you hold down Shift and do it, it'll increment by 10, which is nice. You don't have to hold that arrow key down so much. These are amazing abilities to help us when we're trying to build something, because what we can do is we can get it to look just like we want to and then copy and paste it into our real code. So the developer flow for a front end looks very similar to this while you're trying to build layout. It's a lot of trial and error, bumping things around, trying to get them to fit, and then going, yep, that looks good, and then taking the code back into your real code. This is how I work every day when I'm using front end and trying to build layout. It's a lot of incremental adjustments like this using other tools that we haven't talked about yet. But this is pretty cool. This is very indicative of what it looks like to be a developer while you're trying to figure things out. Okay, so I just wanted to show you the box model in action. Let's go review what the box model does, and then this stuff will make even more sense when we come back to it. So down here, I've got lorem ipsum dolor. So I'm going to right-click, and at this point now, I just want you to put your mouse down and pay attention again. So right-click, inspect element. You can see I've got this box class. If you look at the computed, it says 676 by 16. Well, that's kind of crazy. So let me hover over this box right there. Look how it's going across the whole page. Do you see that blue line going across the whole page up there? Well, that is because this is displayed block. We're going to be talking about that after the box model, but I want to just point it out now and say that's why it feels crazy that it's 676. Well, watch this. If I increase the width, watch what happens to my computed. So if I come back, it's going to be 840 up here. This thing is still lagging behind. But if you look over here, you can see on that little hover icon, it says 840. So this is just depending on when the page was loaded and if I refresh the page. So actually, let me do that really quick. And then you can see the updated value in there. Oh, that's the wrong one. Down here, inspect. There it is, 805. So this is on page load. It'll give you the existing information. Again, we can edit this. So there's two ways to edit divs live in this kind of development setting. Well, there's three ways. Number one, your CSS, right? Like if we go down to our box class, right there, we could start editing it there. Or we can element style edit it, which is going to be like right on the element that we're selecting, which is this one. Or we can use the class here to code it temporary on the page. What I mean by that is, if I said background red, this is temporary. It's not permanently in my code. It's not up here permanently. So if I refresh the page, it'll go away. No red. Versus if I come down here and I said background red, that's going to permanently be there even if I refresh it. Well, of course, I got to save it. I shouldn't say that, but refresh it, go to the bottom of the page, and there's my red bar. So it's really nice to have an environment where it's not permanent, so you can goof around, play with the styles, try to figure it out before committing to something. So in this case, background red is permanent, well, of course, until we delete it. But then if I go in here, inspect element again, you can see I've got my background red. These tools are so important for your success as a developer. I cannot overstate how important getting familiar with these kinds of tools is going to change your life, like literally change your career by getting and digging into these tools and playing around with these things. Okay, so let's start talking about the inside of the box model. So if we go down to the box model section inside of our content here, we've got content, padding, border, and margin. These are things you just have to memorize. Like, there's not many times that I have to say, like, okay, this stuff is always, like, remember we even had the big boss conversation yesterday where it's like sometimes things change depending on the big boss. This is something that does not change no matter what big boss you have. Everything that you will be doing in CSS is dependent upon the box model. So you've got to be able to memorize these things now and start understanding how to use them now. Okay, so let's see. I love going to the inspector to see the computed, so we can see that, right? This is the inside, the content. We can change the content based on the width or the height of the element. So I'm going to keep this red just so we can see it. I'm going to say width 100 px, height 100 px. And now we've got ourselves a box. So you saw how they used to be going across the whole page, right? If I don't set a width, it tries to go across the whole page. Versus with a height, it just tries to fill the content of how large it is. So in this case, how much text we have. These two combined equate to our content. So this is the box model content section. So we're going to say box model content. And in this case, it's always going to look at the content first to set the width or height. So of course, if I don't have a width or height set, it's going to zero out here, right? Just like I did when I refreshed the page. Also, the width and height can provide constraints for the content. So width and height provide constraints because we want to be able to control that box, right? And then there is a thing called overflow. So overflow occurs when content goes beyond constraints. So what I mean by that is, if I have too much content, so if I come in here and add a bunch of lorem ipsum, so you can even edit this side as well, which is super nice. Oh, keyboard started going crazy. All right, so there's a bunch of lorem ipsum, right? And then I'm going to say width 100. And and we need just a little bit more now. So we'll just copy all this stuff over. All right, at this point, we've now gone beyond what the box can control. And so there's a thing called overflow that is kicked in. So if I come in here, well, let's just do it over here and say overflow. We can actually tell it where to overflow to. We can say scroll. It'll actually introduce a scroll bar and give us a scroll bar if we need to. We can actually say hidden, and it'll kill any scroll bars that come in, but it's going to cut content off. So this is kind of an awkward situation. And so you have to think about this as a developer. You control this. Like you've got to communicate with your designer. And if something is going out of control within this box, you've got to be able to have a conversation. That's why social skills and soft skills are so important. You've got to be able to communicate with others. So overflowing is a little bit harder to see here. Let me put some margin on this for a second, so we can see more of the box and how it's going to overflow. So there's our box. And then if I say height 100, for example, oh my goodness, typing. Width 100. So if I take this overflow hidden off, you can see how it just blows out of the box, right? If I put it on, it cuts it off. And then if I put scroll in, you can see the scroll bar kicks in. So this again it's a little nuance of content where overflow does kick in. But just be aware that the default is it's always going to try to wrap down and not left and right. It's going to explode out the bottom. Okay, so that's content. Any questions on content? So let me go to our questions thread here, and let's see what we've got to the top. All right, so in this questions thread here, we've got, well, what is inline block? We're going to get to that in a second. Where are the videos for GitHub? We talked about that. Someone archive it. Why can't I see the link to CSS and HTML when I inspect a page? So that's a great question. When you inspect the page, this piece right here, this is actually going to show you the whole page, and the link is inside of the head tag, and it's going to be right inside of one of our link tags here. So here's our style sheet link, and that's where it is. So that's your answer. It's the link tag that goes inside here. Now remember, in CodePen, you can hit this export button and get it on your machine locally, and you'll see it even clearer there. By the way, there's also a great tool. You can right-click and view page source. But you've got to usually do it on like a white space area. Sometimes it won't show up. But if I view page source, this is different. This is the actual source of the page compared to the inspected element, which shows the document object model. So in this case, this is like all the code that was written. Isn't this crazy to see how much goes into this? CodePen. CodePen's pretty amazing how much is into this thing. So no, this isn't all the code we wrote. This is like all their code. All this stuff wrapped around it. It's pretty cool. Okay. So that's it. I'm using Chrome, but don't have a computer. Any idea why? Usually that's because it's a setting. So right-click, inspect. Yeah, I'm not sure. Reach out to your PM on that one. I've always seen computed in mine, but I wonder if there's different versions of Chrome. So sorry about that, Skylar. Reach out to your PM for that one. Okay, do we have the prep work for 3 days and the video after lunch? So we do the prep work for 3 days today. So after lunch, after lunch should always be whatever's in the calendar, right? So the calendar should have your information for your Git videos, and we move forward. So that's focus on the calendar. If you're done with your assignment, I would totally be prepping for the next day. Like if I were you, I'd jump in the training kit, start watching those videos. Okay, element display none makes more sense once JS is plugged in. Yes, very much so. We'll talk about display property shortly. Why would someone not use Chrome? Because they prefer a different browser. So Firefox has different bookmarking tools. Safari has one of the best things in the world, which is reader mode. So you can actually go on your phone and it kills every ad, just default by the browser, which is amazing. So I prefer Safari for mobile reading, for example. So there's a lot of reasons. Is display block the default, or was that styled somewhere earlier in the code? Display, we're going to get into that. So we'll keep these things. I missed how to get the styling on the inspect tool when I was looking at my site. So remember inspect, and then there should be a little box here on the right. Sometimes when it opens up, it's like this. You have to like control the box and how it looks. Excuse me. But you should be able to find it there somewhere jammed in, depending on the view that you have. You can change the view, by the way. You can go left like that. You can go bottom. I go bottom while I teach. When I'm by myself, I'm working on my own code, I separate this into a new window. It's much easier to consume. Okay. And is there a specific order for CSS properties? Great question, Greg. The answer is no. This is a big boss answer, though. For example, for a long time, Google tried to force people, at least when my friend worked there, he said they tried to force everybody to alphabetize their properties, at least on the team he was working on. And I thought that was ridiculous. But that's why I say big boss. But no, the property order does not matter. Okay, great questions. All right, we've hit our first 30-minute. Geez, can't talk today. Let's take a 5-minute breather. When we come back, we're going to keep diving into the box model. 5-minute timer. Ready, break, get away from the computer. All right, break time is over. I have a poll for you in the Web19 Sprint 01 challenge. Would you go please check out the main channel and answer my poll? It says, how are you liking the question flow today? You just got to go hit the button that says better or the button that says worse. I just want to see how we're feeling about the combination of the Slido tool and the questions thread being handled by the PMs. And of course, if you feel like it's worse, please add a comment why it's worse so we can figure this out. And understand everything's anonymous, so you don't have to be concerned. Okay. So we just talked about the content portion of the box model. We're now moving into the padding portion of the content box model. And this can throw people off a little bit. So pay attention, because this one kind of kicks butt. So if we come down to the HTML, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this and refresh the page so we're back to 0, back to where we should be. So there's our box. Padding is the area between the content and the border. It's the white space, I should say. So if we come down here, scrolling to the bottom is driving me crazy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this box to the top really quick. And I'm going to move my CSS to the top as well, so we're not jumping around like crazy people. Okay, there's our box. So in this case, with our box, I'm going to talk about padding now. So the next portion of the box model is called padding. So padding is the white space. Oops, I got to make sure it goes all the way across. Comments. Okay. White space between content and border. Shorthand version adds padding to all sides. So what that means is, with padding, I'll just put it down here to give it some separation, but white space doesn't matter in CSS syntax. Yep, inside of the properties, I should say. So here we go, 20px. Watch what happens. See what happened there? 20px. That thing got pushed in by 20 pixels. Now, I do have another style running right now called box sizing border box, which I'm going to take off for a second, and I'll show you why. So the default padding, like out of the gate, if you were to start with a brand new project, nothing else inside of it, you would have padding 20px, and it would look like this. If we were to inspect this box and take a closer look and look at the computed, you would see that we have padding 20, content 100, and padding 20. So it's hard to do math live, but 20 plus 20 is 40, plus 100 is 140. So basically, we've now increased the width of our total box area to 140 pixels, not including the margin, which we'll talk about in a second, but this is just the inside of the box. This sucks because we have to start thinking about, like, okay, if I add 20 here, I've got to take 20 there. And so designers don't work that way. They give you a box, they say, make it look like this. And so it's much harder to try to math out, even though it's simple math. You do this math 1,000 times in a day and you're just like sick of it. So wouldn't it be nice if what you set your width to be was the width? That'd be nice. Well, you can do that using box sizing border box. So what that is, it's a crazy property. It sounds just bonkers to say out loud. But here's what it looks like, box sizing. So box sizing tells the box model where to size the border, padding, and content. That's what it does. Notice that we have multiple options. We have border box, we have content box, we have inherit, initial, and unset. The one I'm going to focus on today is border box. Watch what happens when I click this. Pay attention to this box up here. Ready, go. See that? Okay, I'm going to toggle it off and on again. Here we go. Without box sizing, with box sizing. Without box sizing, with box sizing. So hopefully you're noticing that when I say with box sizing, it's going down to 100 pixels because that's the width that we set. So cool. So box sizing border box is the best thing ever. And I feel like should be the default setting for every browser. But That's just me and every other developer. Because if you look at every website, almost every website has a combination of the star selector and border box on everything. So it's kind of a frustrating thing that we even have to type it. But box sizing border box constrains the box to the width and adds padding inward instead of out. That's the only difference between the two. Okay, box sizing border box explodes out. Box sizing, it's like right there, it's just blowing up the box. If it's on, it constrains it to the width that we set. Extremely powerful tool. So how we do that in our code is this little ditty right here. So this looks a little scary at first, but let's walk through it. Remember from yesterday, our HTML inherits throughout the whole page. Like this is an HTML tag. It's wrapping everything on our page. So that's why we say box sizing border box. Everything should inherit this. And then just to make sure that every single thing inherits it, we use the star selector. We then say comma, which means and, right? So star selector, select everything, and there's a before and after pseudo selector. These pseudo selectors allow us to add items before and after HTML elements. And so if we can add stuff before and after, we want to make sure that has box sizing too. And then we say box sizing inherit, and it's going to just inherit from HTML. This little trick right here makes sure that everything possible gets box sizing. Okay? So that is box sizing, and it only has to do with padding, and of course the border as well, but the border is usually not as a hot topic as padding. So that is padding in a nutshell. We use box sizing border box to control our padding inside the contents width. Okay, there are shorthands. So right now, what if we wanted to add 40 or 30 px of space, or 10? What if we only wanted 10 on top, but we wanted 20 on left? Well, you can actually specifically snipe it out. So you could say padding left like that. And then it can actually bump over 20 to the left. And then we could say padding top, we want you to be 40. And then it'll follow that. But this is kind of laborious if you have to type out every single one, right? It's a kind of annoying process. By the way, this works for all sides. So this is top, right, bottom, left, in that order. So if we were to write it out here, top, right, bottom, left. If you squint your eyes a little bit, it looks like you'll be in trouble if you don't remember this. Okay, so top, right, bottom, left. You will be in trouble if you don't memorize the box model shorthand, because this is so powerful. So without any spaces, trouble looks like this. Top, right, bottom, left. Everything's going to 10px. There's some other shorthands too. So we can come over here and we can actually explode it out to control each side. So I'm going to get rid of these individuals for a second. We're going to say padding, top, right, bottom, left. See how I put a little space between each one? And that's why I blew this out, because this actually mimics the full box model sides. So I could say top, and it bumps it down, right, bottom, and left. You can see it move around. Pretty cool. Well, we can actually take it even further to 3. When we do 3 items, so when it looks like this, it actually looks like this. Top, left and right, and bottom. So the first value is going to be the top value. So we can say 10 and only move the top value. Left and right will be exactly what you think, left and right. And then bottom will add bottom. Now, the thing is, you can't really see bottom unless you're getting close to the bottom, so it's harder to see that. But it does work, as you see if I blow out, a ton of pixels. Okay, and then there's a shorthand for 2 pieces of information. So if we just did that, and this is top, bottom, left, right. And so that means the top and bottom will have this number, and left and right will have the number. And then of course, if we go back to just one, we come back to this one, right? So if we wanted to like go in that order, it would look like that. So if you have one value, it automatically sets it top right, bottom left. Now notice what happened here. I have all these active paddings in here. Notice the one on the bottom is the one that has the most specificity. So the question was asked before, does it matter what order you put properties in? There is an answer that says, if it's the same property, yes. So the lowest property of a matching name will always overwrite the ones above it. So be careful with this. I've seen developers forget that there was padding up above and they wrote padding below and overwrote everything. So just watch this. This would never be something I would write unless I was training something how to write the shorthand. Like I would never write code like this. This is just experimental to show you how all the paddings work. Okay. All right, let me just comment these out really quickly. By the way, I'm doing that with Control/ or Command/ if you're on a Mac. It's really handy for commenting quickly. All right, that is padding. Any questions on padding or the box model padding? Let's go over here. Make sure that you're upvoting these questions so they float to the top. Could you explain before and after a little bit more? Sure. Let's take a couple seconds here to do that. Maybe a couple minutes, I should say. So first off, let me show you. We can go over here to the before CSS. Let's see. CSS tricks is always my favorite to go for something like this. So before and after lets you actually put content inside of a div that's not actually written in the HTML, which is crazy. So you can see here, like if we do div after content hi, you can see that hi gets put inside of this div. But we wrote it in CSS. That's crazy. So these are pseudo elements, that meaning they're not really there in the HTML, but they are in the CSS. So if we come back over here, let's say that we're looking at International Airport, for example. So we'll just take a little trip over here to International Airport. We'll put a class on here that just says before test. Before test. Now, if you remember the syntax that I copied over, it looks like this. So let's just comment it out so we can see it. So notice it's got this interesting double colon going on here. Colon, colon, after. So this signifies to the compiler, well, at least to the browser, hey, I want to put some content in here. So then we use a special property called content, and then we can actually throw a string in here and say, you know, testing. You see what happened here? I said before, sorry, let me do before, but you can see what happens, the difference between the two. Isn't that crazy? So you can actually control content here. So before, and of course after has the same effect. So if we come in here and we say after. So testing after. And if we do testing for, notice that it respects the white space. And yes, we can style these too. So we can see color red and color blue, just to see the difference. So that's it. These are called pseudo elements. You might be going, why the crap do we have these? And the answer is, you could actually put in some really cool things. Like, have you ever seen those custom bullet points that look really cool? And you're like, that's more than just the dot that I've seen in, you know, Microsoft Word. Well, that's where those come from. A lot of people will put their bullet points in here and make custom things that look really cool. You know, CSS portions that are at the end. Like, there's some really cool stuff you can do with this. But at least now you know it exists and why it's there. Okay. Let's go back over here. Is the trouble order specific to padding or other properties? Great question. The answer is margin also has it, which is the last thing we'll talk about. So that's why I spend so much time on it, because it does apply to margin. So memorizing trouble for padding helps you in other places later on. Great question. Is display block the default, or is that style? So okay, we'll get to that. With the pseudo before and after, can you elaborate? Okay, we did that. Sweet. Why do we use padding? Like why, how is it better than setting the width and height of an area? What useful qualities does padding have? Great question. So the answer to that is controlling the white space between portions. So width and height can only do so much. It doesn't control, like you see this gutter right here? Like this gutter right there could be controlled by padding or margin. So it just depends on like if it's inside the box or if it's outside the box. So let's see what ESPN was doing. I'm going to go ahead and inspect this element here. Okay, so in this case, if we look at the computed, they had a width and a height that was set already, and they're using just a little bit of margin to give something there. So not really using any padding there. Come over here. All right, now we're seeing some padding being used. So in this case, they're using padding inside the box to control that little gutter that we were talking about. So everything in green right here is padding. These little nuances really help you. Watch this. If I took the padding out, look how crappy that looks. Oops. Didn't mean to click it. But you can see before I clicked it, oh my gosh, all these ads are just flying through because of March Madness. All right, so if we come over here, inspect, get rid of that padding again. Look at that. Without padding, ESPN would be a totally different website. It would look really awful. So padding is all about visualization, aesthetic, giving that nice gutter. So that's a good example, non-example of padding versus padding up here versus no padding down here. So it's all about making your site look good. Okay, great question. Okay, would you typically set box sizing in your CSS reset and not worry about it? Usually I'll do exactly what I did here at the top of the page. So this before and after, this general style there, I will always put that right after my reset. We'll talk about resets right after we finish up the margin. So hold on to that thought, but that's a great question. Okay, I'm going to answer two more and then we'll move on. Earlier you told us we should have already watched the Git videos, but those were not in the pre-course material for today. So they were in the calendar for yesterday. So if you go to the calendar, I told you yesterday to click in the calendar, and then there's those two videos you're supposed to watch. So that's what I meant by that. Sorry if it was confusing. But make sure you're watching these two videos and this video if you haven't watched them all. Okay? All right. When you added more content, there was overflow. Does the page expand until the content is displayed because the margin is only 20? Yes. So if you don't control your overflow, the page would expand forever and actually introduce scroll bars and all sorts of fun stuff. So that is very good observation by you. Good job. Okay. Let's jump over to the last portion of our box model. Make sure you're upvoting questions in there that you want to get to the top. Let's go over here to, and of course, if questions aren't being answered there, go use the questions thread with the PMs. So we've got our box sizing padding that we just finished up over here. We talked about all that crazy, all these notes in here. Let's go margin. This is the last part. Actually, sorry, let's go border. My goodness. Don't skip over border. It's important. So border is exactly what you think it is. There's no frills about it. It's just a border. But here's the shorthand. 1px, solid black. Let's do 10 just so we can see the border. And you can see that because we're using box sizing border box, it's pushing in. If I didn't use box sizing, it would push out, just like padding. So we're using our 10px solid. So let me talk about what the shorthand looks like. So in this case, it's going to be the border width, or I should say size, type, and color. So that's what's going to happen every time you use this shorthand. But guess what? You can also do this, border top, and you can do the same shorthand, but it's the same thing over and over. So let's say we wanted this to be green, just to showcase it. You can see the difference right there, right? So solid. You could say dashed. You could do double. There's a lot of crazy borders you can do. So I would recommend that you just look at W3 Schools, go look at the border, all the different properties, the CSS Tricks Almanac, whatever you like most for your reference. But this is just one of those things I wouldn't lose sleep over right now. Like, I'd lose sleep more over padding and margin and shorthand, just getting those things on lock. For now, border is just really straightforward. It's just a border. However, border can be used in really cool ways. For example, like this, providing what looks like a horizontal rule is actually a border here, which is pretty cool. And it makes it a lot easier to code when you're trying to build layout with like lines that are separating things. Borders are a great way to do that. So we'll look at our code in a second with how we're doing that. So that's border. The last portion of the box model is margin. Margin is the white space on the outside of the box. So I've already got it over here. I used it just to give ourselves some breathing room. You can see how it got pushed up here to the top page. So I bring it back in. There's the white space. It's pretty straightforward. Like, it's just the white space around the box. There's not anything really special about it. The thing is, it has, well, I guess I shouldn't say that. It does have the trouble. Same concept here. So all these things can be applied in margin. So if I come down here, I just got to swap the word margin, and they all do the same thing. So the shorthand exists just like in padding. So if I were to comment this out and comment this in, so top, right, doesn't matter because it's so far away. Bottom doesn't matter because it's so far away. And then left is going to be like 60. So you can control it completely with each side of the trouble. So that's why I'm saying this is super good to memorize now, because it's used everywhere. So margin, if we go back to ESPN.com and we go look at like how they're using margin, inspect this tool, we can start to see on the outside of these divs, or in this case, these section tags, anything that's like the orange color is going to be margin. So you can see that margin, right? If I hover over that. So if I add more margin here, you can see how it's pushing the white space between elements. So margin is all about pushing things away, whereas padding is all about pushing things in, if you want to have a way to think about those two differences. So if you want to push out, margin. If you want to push in, padding. Okay, that is it, my friends. That is the box model. And if we were to inspect this element, now we can see every aspect of the box model in our computed portion. Let me put margin back in before I say that. There we go. Someone hit save, so you have this inspect element here. And now if we go to the computed, we can see every portion of the box model is being hit. So content is being hit, padding is. So here's something really interesting. Because of box sizing border box, notice that our content, that we styled this to say 100, right? We said 100 px. Well, why isn't that 100? Well, it's because it's actually taking into account the border, the padding, and the content. Box sizing border box is automatically doing that for us. So we don't have to do the math. It's so nice. So 10, 20, 30, 40 plus 60 is 100. So it still does equal 100. It's just the browser does it automatically for us through box sizing border box. So helpful. Okay. So what I want you to do is I want you to go to your favorite website or a website that you frequent. I want you to take 5 minutes and poke around in that website. I want you to right click on it. I want you to try to mess around with the website with our inspector tools by using the box model. So go for 5 minutes, pick out your favorite website, and start pushing things around using the box model. I just want you to see it in action. 5-minute timer, ready, go. Okay. So hopefully in the last 5 minutes, you were able to go to a website that you're familiar with, poke around with the code, and maybe come up with some new questions as to why things work the way they did. So let me answer some questions, and then we'll head off to a 5-minute break. Going back to Slido here. So we're going to get here. Can we get here? Okay. Can you make margin negative to force overlapping elements? Yes, you can. Negative margins are part of the ecosystem. However, if you're relying on negative margins because you don't know why, that's different. So if you built a website and you're like, why is it this way? And you have to use negative margin to get it to be fixed, that makes me concerned. But if you honestly were trying to do a negative margin because the design file had something overlapping in a negative space, that's fine. So if you understand why you're using it, I'm good. But it's part of the ecosystem. Negative margins are part of how everything works. It's a great question. Do designers give you dimensions? Yes. So usually you're getting a design file with dimensions that are hard-coded because designers can't possibly code in a percent-based layout like they're living in a fixed world. So they're usually using Sketch or Figma or Photoshop or Illustrator or Adobe XD. There's so many things right now. GIMP, Paint. Hopefully you never get a file from somebody using Paint. But they usually give you something, and I've got some tips and tricks that I'm going to show you later to utilize those files with your code, like later in the course, probably next week, I think. But yes, usually you're getting a hard-coded pixel value. Is there a way to remove box sizing from a certain element? Yes, you can go into box sizing and just say content box again, but I really don't recommend it. Like everything should be box sizing border box. Oops. Archive. What's up with first child and whatnot? So first child allows you to select elements in the order in which they showed up. So for example, if I had all these A tags, so if I went to my A tags, so you can see I've got all my header nav A's, right? And then if I come up here and I say first child, this will allow me to only manipulate the first child. So I could say color red. And you can see that the first child of all matching children, meaning all the A tags are children and siblings, if you will. And so first child is actually syntax. If you use this colon, just like we used our pseudo element, this is a pseudo selector that allows us to grab the first. And of course, you could do the same thing with last child. I don't think there's a middle child, which is so funny. So first child and last child allow you to do that. And then of course you can actually use nth child to get wherever you want to get. And you can pass in extra information here. And so the nth child can actually allow you to go through each element one by one. So that is the child thing. The reason I don't really like these things sometimes is because sometimes people get so excited about not adding classes in HTML, and they just want to live in the CSS 100%. This can be dangerous because if you add another child in here and you're on the third child, for example, then you've just messed everything up. So usually when I'm using nth child or first child, it's for the first or last. I try to avoid specifically styling children like the third child. I usually try to make sure it's repeatable. There you go. That's a little lesson on the nth child really quickly. Okay, last question. So the before and after pseudo elements was the answer to the stretch from yesterday. No, I mean, you could have done, the stretch yesterday was just to say, use CSS only without touching the HTML. So you could have used before, after, pseudo selectors, anything that's new, but that was just to say, try doing this without adding HTML. So yeah, that could have been one of many, Greg. Great question. Let me see, I think this is a great question. Is there any reason to memorize all of the different combos? Wouldn't knowing top, bottom, left, right, and treble be the same? No, they would not be the same. They're all different, just like you identified here. So top, right, bottom, left is just one value. Top, right, bottom, left separated is 4 separate values, etc. So it is definitely a great reason to memorize all of the different combos because other developers use them all the time. And so if you come into somebody else's code and you see 3 values in the padding, you don't know what it means, it's a hindrance to you, right? So you have to make sure you know all the little combos for trouble. I'm telling you, this is something you just got to buckle down on and memorize. Okay, I think I talked about before and after. They're not necessarily needed. They're just extra cheese. They're just nice usually. There are cases where need would be used, but they're very few and far between. Okay. Man, good questions. Make sure you're upvoting the ones you want to see answered. All right. Let's take a 5-minute breather. When we come back, we're going to dump into inline, block. We're going to understand why those things matter and how we use them. So take a break, step away from the computer. All right, break is up. We're going to move into the display settings now. That doesn't mean that you'll never use box model again. It just means you got to use it everywhere. So what I'm going to do is actually introduce to you. I'm not going to delete all this code. We'll just keep it here. Like, this is really, really important. I'm just going to comment out the box. And now that you've seen the box model in action, it should be more apparent inside of this international airport layout that we've been building since yesterday. So now what I've done is I've gone through here and we've added in. So if we skip past here, we can see where the margin has been brought in on the P tag. So notice this is shorthand, right? Top, bottom, left, and right. There it is. And so you can see how this is very helpful because I don't want to have padding on the insides, right? Because it makes it look like squished in there, and I don't want that. But it's actually good to see it, just to see how that works. By setting a value to 0, again, it just takes out the pixel anyway, so it's no big deal. So in that case, like that's an example of how I was using margin with shorthand right there. Also note that we're using margin 0 auto on our container. So container margin 0 auto automatically adjusts the margin for the browser's window. So that's how it keeps it centered in the page, at least horizontally. So this is how you can center displayed block, and we'll talk about that right after this. I just wanted to showcase to you that we're using margin and padding throughout this website, using shorthands all over the place. So like even in this case with the A tags, we're using shorthand, or sorry, we're just using one specific value versus our shorthand here versus our shorthand there. And notice that padding and margin have the same shorthand. So this is really cool to see. So this is an example for you to look at and study and kind of play around with on your own. So that's why we have these things, so you can see how it looks in action in a guided project here. Okay, so I want everybody to pay attention to this right here, ipsum dolor, inside of our HTML. Let's go see what that looks like. So ipsum dolor, you can see, is wrapped inside of a strong tag. So a strong tag is actually semantic here because it lets screen readers know that it needs to be understood to be emphasized. If we don't do that, some people used B tags back in the day, and it would bold things, but they've been depreciated in the form of a strong tag so that they're more accessible. So why am I showing you a strong tag? Well, I think it's a great example for all of the display properties that we're going to look at next. So here we go. The first thing that we have to understand is that all elements come with an innate display property in them. Now, I can't remember who it was, but somebody posted this yesterday, and I loved it, the htmlreference.io. So I thought this was great. And what it does is it shows you and lets you filter 113 HTML elements. And you can actually go in here and look at all of these like experimental, meaning that they're new elements to the HTML5 spec. Meta elements, meaning that you don't see them, they actually go into the head tag, which we'll talk about more next week. Self-closing elements, meaning that they don't have an actual slash closer at the end of them. For example, if we were to look at self-closing elements, you can see all of them here. I mean, this is such a cool system. I really like this. So I'm going to add this to the training kit because I like it so much. But you can see inline and block are both here. They're showcasing all of inline and block elements. Pretty cool, right? So let's say we just want to look at all block level elements. It's a lot of block level elements. So the vast majority of elements are actually going to be block that you're going to be using. Even though there's a ton of inline elements, most of the elements you're going to be using are going to be block. So what the heck does that mean? What is a block level element? Well, in the training kit, we've identified all these pieces down here with traits. So traits of like what these display types look like. Ironically, the first one that we looked at is none. So none removes the element from the document. This is actually really interesting because we'll see more of this when we start using JavaScript. But let's see what it looks like here. So display, none. Oh, it's gone. But what's interesting is it took it out of the flow. So what I mean by that is if I comment it back in, notice that it gets actually removed, like snipped out of the flow. Okay, versus visibility hidden. Watch what happens here. You can see that it's hidden, but it stays in the flow, which is kind of weird. But if you want this behavior, sure. And there's some scenarios where you might want to have the white space maintained. But it's good to know that visibility is a different beast compared to display type. Okay, so that's the first portion of what we're going to understand is done. I've got some notes that I've taken straight from the training kit. I'm calling them student-facing notes. I'm going to pop them over to you right here, just so you can have them. This is basically the training kit, but brought into CodePen so you don't have to look around. So display none removes the element from the flow. Very useful for JavaScript. So let's talk about display block. Display block takes up the horizontal space if it can. So that if it can is important for later. Introduces a page break, meaning it tries to bump everything down below it, and respects the box model completely, meaning we can use content, padding, border, margin, etc. So let's go see what that looks like. By the way, strong tag, if I were to just look at it under the hood with my inspect tool, you will see that the computed display property is inline. So that's why it's inside of the paragraph right now, not making a mess. And I really like it because it showcases how we can make a mess with blocks. So let's see what happens when I say block. Boom. So it just pushed everything out of the way, right? If I were to hover over this with my inspector tool, we could see the blue highlight is going across the whole page as far as it can, right? This is an attribute or the behavior of what a display block does. It tries to take up all of the horizontal space that it possibly can. And it's bumping the text above it and below it out of the way. I like to think of display block as an obnoxious thing. It's like, I want my space, don't mess with me. Also note that it respects box model. So what I mean by that is I can say margin, top and bottom, left and right, and you can see it gives me my top and bottom if I wanted to do some shorthand. So left and right have more, top and bottom, you can see more and more. It respects everything. That's pretty crazy, right? And if we hover over it, you can actually visualize the box model in action. So that's display block. Now watch what happens when I display inline. Interesting. Some crazy stuff just happened. Number one, we no longer have that page break. It's gone. Number two, the top and bottom portions of the box model are completely ignored. So in this case, if I tried to set a height on this, let's see what happens. Let's do something crazy like 100px. Nothing. It just ignores it. Margin, right now it's 50, right? Top and bottom. It's totally being ignored right now. Let's try padding. Totally being ignored right now, top and bottom. So you have to understand, when you display inline something, we come over here, it takes up the horizontal space of its content only. The content flows around inline elements, so you can see that lorem did not get kicked out. It respects the horizontal aspects of the box model, but not the vertical. So left and right margins, but not the top and bottom. So notice that this is still being respected. And we'll just auto flow the content. So that's an inline element. They're extremely valuable for like anchor tags. So A tags, like if you have a link in the middle of a paragraph, you see that all the time. Those are actually inline elements. Spans, if you've ever heard of those, they're presentational markup that allow you to change things. Those are inline elements. Strong tag, inline element. So again, this HTML reference here is really cool if you just want to study what some of the inline elements are. So if you hit the A tag, go in here and you can see all these cool examples. Awesome website. So here's the thing. Do you need to memorize all these? Heck no. This is not something you need to memorize. You need to find the tags that you're using in everyday life. And those tags have been given to you basically yesterday in our semantic HTML, and then you can add those tags as you continue to progress. But for now, it's basically like 10 tags max that you're using as you start building basic layouts. Okay, so that is inline and block. So there's a third one though, called inline dash block. So look what happened here. It's got traits of both. So notice it's respecting the box model completely. It's respecting my height. It's respecting my margin and respecting my padding. So it's like box model respect, 100%. But something that's different is it's actually letting content flow around it. So it doesn't create that hard break anymore, which is really valuable. So in this case, it's kind of silly. We're just putting a bunch of gross spacing here to showcase it. Let's see how this is actually valuable inside of a layout. So I'm going to go ahead and just refresh so we get rid of all the crazy stuff we just did. Go down to my strong tag again. Review really quickly. So block inline is the default, and then inline block. So notice that if I don't set anything with inline block, it feels like an inline element. But now I can use margin, and it's going to use the top and bottom. Versus if it's just inline, it disregards the top and bottom. Pretty cool. Okay. So that was just showing the 3 different use cases. Let's see how this thing works in action now. So in this case, we've got our A tags up here. Actually, let's go to, I think the A tags are good, but let's go make sure. Let me go look at my A tags. So all these A tags are actually displaying as inline. Go by display properties. You can see they default as inline. By the way, where do defaults come from? They come from standards. So HTML5, CSS3, browsers adhere to standards, and that's why we even have default settings. So that's where they come from originally. So in this case with A tags, they're all inline, so you can see that they're all fine being inline, but what if I wanted to add some margin to the top and bottom, for example, of my A tags? So if I said margin, you know, the top and bottom was 40, left and right was 0. Well, it's not listening, right? It's not doing anything because they're inline. So if I came in here and I wanted them to listen, I could say display block, but see what happens? They try to create their own new line, right? The new break. This is not behavior that we want. So we can introduce inline block. It's going to respect my margin, top and bottom, so I can control it now. And then I can control my left and right as well. So inline block is an amazing tool to allow us to do these things. So let's put the navigation on the right side of International Airport. So I'm going to refresh the page. So let's say I want this navigation to go up here in the top right. This is exactly what you're going to actually have to look at in your homework, or not your homework, but your afternoon project today. So if I look at this navigation system, what does the navigation look like? Well, it's displayed block right now. That's the default setting. So if I've got this navigation displaying block and my H1 is also displaying block, so if I come down here, I look at my display, yep, it's also block. So both of these items will never give up their horizontal space. They're always going to fight each other. So I have to make them play nice. Well, how do we make them play nice? Inline block. So watch this. If I go down to my code, turn this off, go down to my navigation and my H1. All right, so here's my H1, here's my nav. Notice that HTML-wise, they are nested inside of header. It's always smart of you to look at your HTML first to find out where they live and like where are they in conjunction with each other. So my H1 and my nav are actually in a great spot to be next to each other. So the problem is they're block, so they're going full screen. So what I could do here is I could say display inline block on my H1. Now, if I go look at my H1 now, you can see that it doesn't go across the full screen anymore. The problem is nav is still annoying, right? It's still a block level element. It's still getting in the way. So it's not going to listen to anybody. So what do? Well, we change its display type. So we come in here, watch what happens. Now they are on the same line because they're both inline block elements, and they're both only taking up as much space as they need. So if we inspect this element and go to the nav is only as large as the inside of its A tag, right? So now we've got a new problem we've got to solve. How do we move the navigation so it's over here on the right side of this thing? Well, there's a lot of ways we can do this actually in CSS. One way is we can actually just add margin to the left and just bump it and just slowly get there. Well, it jumps to the next line, then we know we've gone too far. So on average, it's always good to round down to the next pixel so you have a good solid number right here. So margin left 60 pixels does the job. Like, it does get the job done. There are many ways to do this, like I said, in CSS. For example, we could also use floats. So float right, it would float to the right, but that introduces a whole other plethora of problems with clears, and so that's why we're not going to talk about it. There's also position, absolute, and we could say top 0, right 0. The problem is when you absolutely position something, it goes to the top right of whatever the next relative parent is. That sounds really crazy when I say that out loud. What that means is it's just trying to go to the body tag because the body tag is positioned relative. So if I wanted to keep it constrained, I can go to my header tag, which contains both of them, and I can say position relative. And then it knows where the absolute positioning should go. So here's the rub with CSS. There are 5 valid ways to do everything. And as a new learner, it's maddening. You're just like, oh my gosh, you just did 3 crazy things with 3 crazy backstories that I've got to learn. And the answer is, yeah, I did. But at the same time, that's kind of the fun of learning something new. It's like trying to figure out all these new things together and building your knowledge. For now, for your assignment this afternoon, I have no problem if you just want to go down the route of just margin left. That's no big deal. But if you want to challenge yourself, take a look at floats. Take a look at positioning absolute and see how they're all different. The margin left gets the job done and is all I would ask for your assignment for layout today. Okay? So looking at this, let's review what we did. Both these elements are displaying block, right? So international airports block, our navigations block. We then understood the difference between the 3. So block tries to take up all the space it can. Inline block doesn't. It only takes up the space it needs. So we first make our H1 only take up the space it needs, and header nav take up the space it needs. When we did that, they now can be on the same line because there's enough room for both. We then introduced a margin left, and we've messed with 60 pixels to get it close enough to the right. This is valid. This is fine for now as we learn. Tomorrow when we start using Flexbox, we'll have a way better way to do this automatically. And of course, those of you that know CSS Grid, there's other ways to do this as well. I'm not kidding when I say there's 5 ways to do this. But for today, I want you to focus on just the box model in conjunction with display inline block. Okay, so what if we wanted to take these 2 paragraphs and have them 50-50, like 50% on the page, 50% on the page? Let's go look at that and use our new skills with display inline block. So if I come down here, you can see it says fly with us, right, under H2. Here's our 2 P tags. So these 2 P tags say top content -P. So let me go find my top content area. It's probably going to be under top content. I don't even have a class for these yet, which is just fine. So inside of main content, and then I've got a top content section. So what I'll do is I'll come over here and I'll just say top content, and I could actually just grab the P tags in the top content. That's a valid selector. Whenever I'm trying to select something, guess what? Border is your best friend to find out what you've got. So I'll do this all the time. Border 1px solid red. Then it really shows you what the box model looks like. It shows you the outside of the box. So whenever I'm developing, I'll just have this on lock. And sometimes I'll even make a class called test. So like if I'm like doing a ton of layout, I'll do this. I'll just say border 1px solid red. Brain just died for a second. And then you can just go in here and say test, and test on your HTML. And it'll just give you those borders so you can see exactly what you're looking at. Once we start using pre-processing, you'll understand why that's even better. But for now, I just wanted to show you that I will do that. When I'm developing like on this kind of thing where I'm showing things, I'm always just doing an inline border like this to show. Let's see, where am I? There we are. So I'll do this all the time to find out where I am inside of my code. I highly recommend you do this as well as you're learning. Okay, so 1px solid red shows us where we are. Now what I want to do is I want to 50-50 these things. So, okay, how can I do 50-50? What do you think? Give me some answers in our Sprint 01 channel here. How can I get these paragraphs to be 50-50? So inline block. Okay, but what if I just say display inline block? Will that work? Let's try it. Display inline block. Nope, didn't work. What am I missing here? Okay, I see a 50% width. Let's try that. Width 50%. Wah, wah. What's going on here? What do you think's going on here? Those are 50%. Okay, let's try it. Everybody's saying 40%. Okay, but now Book a Flight came out here and hang out with us. We need to get all the way across. So here, the reason I'm having you think out loud with me is because there's something really stupid about inline block. It's really annoying. If you don't have the HTML right next to the other HTML with no white space, this is the dumbest thing ever. I hate this. But watch this. If you don't have white space between the p tags, watch what happens. 50%. Isn't that dumb? So when you're using inline block, if you have white space between elements, it will actually jump it down to the next line. Isn't that stupid? That is so stupid. But if you didn't know that, your mind's exploding right now. So this is one of those gotchas that I learned the hard way in my life. But that is so annoying. So what you could do in the interim is to have a 49%, so you don't have to do that stupid thing. Or even 49.5%. So there you go. It's just so annoying. And the answer to that is that's how it was built. That's how the spec was built. So that is why that's happening. So inline block elements, the best I think you could do is like 4.9, 49.99. Nope, it's not even there. 8. Nope, that doesn't work. 7. Anything past 49.5 is going to bust. And that's just because that's how it works. That's just how inline block works. It's super annoying. That's why you're here, learning it from me, learning from my mistakes on how this works. So in this case, 49.5 is probably what I would do. I would never go up here and get rid of the white space. Like, that's just ludicrous. But you can do it if you want. Notice the little gutter goes away. There's the gutter. Okay? So a lot of developers for many years built layout just like this. They used inline block. They either used percentages or hard-coded widths to build layout like this. Like, this is a very common practice. Now, one thing you might notice right now is that because this paragraph on the right is not tall enough. It's not matching this one on the left. So there's actually one more thing with inline block. It's all inside your notes, by the way. Everything I'm talking about is all here. So with inline block, we can actually use vertical alignment. Vertical alignment. So with vertical alignment, we can actually say vertical align top. So if I go over to my P tags that I just changed here, vertical align top, it'll actually line everything up to the top of the box. So that's how you get everything to line up nicely. Only inline block elements and inline elements, by the way, can do that. Block level cannot do that. So what I want you to do now is I want you to take this, plan your flight, and I want you to do the same thing we just did here. So go to plan your flight. I'll give you the code here. I want you to 50% that. Make that link. I'm going to give you 5 minutes here. I want you to get these boxes to line up 50% with each other. Ready, steady, go. All right. Yes, some of you finished really quickly. Some of you are probably still working on it. I want to address both. So we're in a huge class. We've got 189 people in this Slack. You know, we've had classes this large before as well. One thing I want to point out is when you get something done, it's something that you should be proud of. Like you should definitely be like hyped on it. But the reality is somebody else is probably getting their butt kicked. Like we're all learning, right? So try to refrain from being like, got it done, I'm awesome, because somebody else might read your message after you post that 30 seconds ago. I must suck. You know, I'm not doing good. And the reality is we're all climbing the mountain together. So make sure that if you're excited about something, we actually have a show it off channel. It's called Show It Off. And so if you want to go show off some work or see what other students are doing, go ahead and pop it in that Show It Off channel. Let's see, let me show you Show It Off. It's actually a really fun channel to go see. I love going there and seeing what everybody's working on. So that's where you want to go. That's where I want people to go if they're really excited. But as far as in our channel, let's keep that stuff together. So when other people are struggling, they're not feeling like, oh crap, I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. So great job. A lot of you were like, yep, copy and paste. You're not wrong, but I want you to understand why it works. So remember, inline block, if we come down to it in our plan our flight section, it was the same concept reused again, except this time we had to think about, well, how do we use this with the P tags inside of here, right? So the H2 is a block level element, so it's going across the whole page. That's why we don't have to worry about it. But these P tags are how we could do it. So we go down to our bottom content. So really, you could have done just this, and it would have worked. But I want you to understand why it's working. And so in this case, with display inline block, it's going only as wide as the content is. And we told it how wide it to be, remember? Like this width is really, really important. If we don't have the width, remember, it just goes full screen because we have no constraints. So inline block still just tries to fill up as wide as it is. That's why we've got to have that knowledge of the box model and using width, for example. Now, I was using a percent just to showcase a 50%. Like we could have hard coded a value in here and it would have followed whatever value. And we could have, continued to figure out how wide this thing was. And again, if they're not next to each other, it's going to be messed up. So anyway, we can mess with hard-coded numbers. We can do percentages. We're going to talk more about responsive units next week. But I wanted to showcase how this could work right now using inline, because that's what your assignment looks like. So let me answer questions in the Slido for our last couple of minutes together here. So what is inline block? Now you know inline block is a combination of both properties of inline and block smashed together. I would say inline block is the best of both worlds. Might be a good idea to remind students about shortcuts to launch developer tools. So Control-Shift-I as sites. Yeah, you can do that, or you can just go right up here and just go to your dev tools. Where is it? More tools, and then you go to your developer tools. So in my case, it's Alt-Command-I. So it really depends on your computer and your browser. So it's not going to work for everybody the same way. But yes, you can go into your dev tools and do that. Great comment. Google Flights wouldn't let me add a border to the element. As soon as I typed it, it exited out. Oh, interesting. I'm not sure. So that could be kind of fun to look at, but I'm not sure what's going on there. Let's just go see. Google Flights. Inspect. Let's go grab this div there. And then we'll say border 1EPX solid blue. And if I click off of it, well, it looks like it stayed. So I don't know, maybe that was a weird, maybe it's like something inside here. Let's try this. Border 1px solid blue. Oops. I don't know. Maybe there's something going on with, maybe it's refreshing the page for you or something. But there you go. You can go add border to anything. Box model is literally everywhere. Like I can't think of an example where it's not being used. Everything on the internet is a box. Everything. Okay. Let's come back. Is display block the default, or was that styled somewhere earlier? So it is the default for certain elements. It is not the default for other elements. So this reference here, which I'm going to be adding to the training kit because I like it so much. This is a great place to just look at the elements that are and are not. You can filter them off really nicely there. MDN is labeled inline block as legacy. Do you expect it to stop being supported at some point? No. It's still being used quite a bit. So not really sure. Let's see, MDN. Let's see. I don't see anything saying it's legacy. Yeah, there's a depreciated value like in old browsers, but I wouldn't look at MDN. I would look at Can I Use. CanIUse.com is a great place to find out if things can be used. So inline block. Then you can see what browsers are actively supporting it. So this thing is not depreciated at all. Pretty cool. Goes all the way down to IE6 and IE7 with a display of inline by default, which is crazy. So that's why so many developers used it for layout for so many years. I mean, this is back in 2009 all the way to 2001, 2006 with some inline block. That's crazy. In internet terms, that's crazy. Crazy long time. Okay. Some websites, namely Reddit, seem not to like to be tinkered with. Is it just because they refresh so often? Perhaps, if the page is being refreshed a lot. So if we go to Reddit and we not gonna have any notifications, inspect here, come in here, grab this, put a div, border 1px solid blue. Does seem like it's pretty it's jumping around. Like you can see the URLs getting kind of jumpy, but seems like it's working for me. I don't know. Why use inline instead of inline block when inline block provides the value, but inline with more control? Well, there are inline uses. For example, an A tag inside of a paragraph. So if I wanted to link out, book your flight here. Oh, I already forgot the short code for that. Is it that? No, that wasn't it. Oh, shoot. I think I lost it here. Let's go back here. But yeah, you can just wrap an A tag around it. Control-Shift-A. Okay. Control-Shift-A. Thank you. Anchor tag. Can I just say anchor tag? I can't remember. Yeah, it's so freaking cool. Okay, so if I come in here and I just say like, ESPN.com, just for lack of creativity right now, you can then see an inline element. It's extremely useful in that case. So inline elements are great for bolding things, like emphasizing things or linking things out. Inline blocks definitely have a place in our ecosystem. But when it comes to layout, you're not wrong. Like, yes, layout, inline block is the king. Okay, does float left auto assign inline block? No, it actually is totally different. It's just displayed float, like it floats left. Sorry, it keeps its display type. It's just that you're floating it inside the layout. Is there ever an instance where you think content box is better than border box? Not right now. Not with the basic layouts we're doing. I can't really think of anything. What's the difference between resetting and normalizing? Aha, yes, we didn't talk about this, but I do want to talk about it. So when you have cross-browser compatibility issues, we have Firefox, Chrome, Safari, different browsers. We want our styles to look the same across all. And so what we can do is we can actually go into our CSS settings, actually have a reset on. I'm going to take it off and let's see what happens. You can see the page changed quite a bit. So it's hard to see with the untrained eye, but the spacing's a little bit different. So watch what happens when I hit the reset again. See, everything got shored up over here. So what the reset's doing, in this case, it's Eric Meyer's reset. Eric Meyer was an early pioneer of the web. Let's see, where is the reset? He's still very active in coding, but in this case, he suggested, what if we zeroed out all of the box model for as many elements as we can, so that we didn't have to worry about what Google would render versus what Firefox would render, because they're different companies. Like Firefox is run by a totally different mentality than Google, right? Which is Chrome, than Apple, which is Safari, than Mozilla, right? So they all have different things that they want to push forward, including their own styles. Now, the good news is they've all been coming together lately in newer browser versions, but in older browser versions, it was awful. And we call those the browser wars. Quite literally, they fought with each other over properties. And that's why JavaScript and CSS are sometimes conceived to be such a mess, because of the different browsers. Okay, we are out of time today. Let's review your project. So user interface project, great idea web page. So you're going to be downloading this. That's why you've got to watch those Git videos after lunch. That's why you've got to do them. You're going to be cloning this project down to your machine. And if you watch the videos, you should be able to do this exactly. You will then read the instructions here. So yesterday they were inside of comments. Today they're going to be inside of a README file. This is called a README file right here. Make sure you're only looking at the objectives first. I'm telling you now, this might be one of the hardest days in the first 5 weeks of your time at Lambda School. This day is one of the hardest days. It gets easier tomorrow. I just want to preface it right now. If you do get frustrated today, everybody got frustrated today. Your PMs, when I talked to them this morning, they all kind of laughed like, yeah, today was really rough. So be gentle with yourself today. It's not going to be super, super easy, but that's why you're here, to get better at these things. So you're going to be given a desktop design file, and you're going to build this web page today. And when you build this web page today using the tools that we talked about, inline block, box model, one step at a time. Use the guided project today as your guide. Like, I've already given you all the layout pieces of what you need to do today, secretly, not so secret now. So guided project is basically your project done as a guide for you on how you could approach these problems. Okay? So if you look closely, it looks pretty similar. We've got a navigation, we've got images, and some layout. Navigation, images, layout. Okay? So use this as a guide for you on how to accomplish your goal. So you're going to be building this from scratch. You're going to start with nothing and build this web page out this afternoon. So if you go look into the Great Idea website code here, you're going to download this. And I've given you the content, because most companies will give you content. And you'll be able to jump in here and download, or through Git's clone, you'll have this on your computer. Okay, so watch those Git videos. Remember, take a break at lunch, come back, watch the videos. I know some of you are not in a Pacific time zone. Most of you are not. Take the break, though. Maybe you're not eating food, but take a break and then come back and start this project. Okay, that's your assignment, is basically to build that layout using all the tools that we showed today with these in mind. Okay, thanks so much for your feedback. I'm going to go read the rest of these questions, and if I see a common pattern, I'll answer any of those. No Flexbox or CSS grid today. It's on purpose. I'm tying your arm behind your back and forcing you to use display types and box model. Okay, thanks everybody. I'll see you tomorrow. Don't hate me. I love you. Bye.